What's happening, everybody? This is Ryan Thomas, the host of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, coming to you live on YouTube.com. I wanted to hop on here and give you guys my take, my prediction, my preview of UFC 213. UFC 213 goes down July 8th in Las Vegas, Nevada, I believe, in the T-Mobile Arena. The card has had a bit of a shakeup. The main event is Amanda Nunes versus Valentina Shevchenko for the UFC Women's Bantamweight title. The co-main event features a very interesting bout between Yoel Romero and Robert Whitaker. And then my favorite fight on the card features the Gamers, Donald Cerrone versus Robbie Lawler, the former UFC welterweight champion. Donald Cerrone, the now UFC welterweight. Very excited for that fight in particular. Very excited for Jim Miller versus Anthony Pettis. Anthony Pettis, in his own right, the former UFC lightweight champion. So a lot of big fights on this card. One of them also a heavyweight battle between Alistair Overeem and the former heavyweight UFC champion Fabricio Werdum. So a lot of former champs on this card. A lot of fighters trying to become a champion on this card in Yoel Romero and Robert Whitaker. And of course, Amanda Nunes looking to defend her UFC Bantamweight title versus none other than the last opponent that Amanda Nunes faced that really gave her a run for her money, and that was Valentina Shevchenko. So before I get into the preview, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Ryan Thomas. I am the host of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, a podcast that started off in January of 2016 on Spreaker.com. We've been grinding, put out my 200th show, and I want to interact with you guys, the Thomas Take listeners, on YouTube. And I love YouTube. I love what YouTube is all about marketing and putting stuff out there. So as active as I have been most recently, I really like interacting via video. So here I am, rocking my Buffalo Bills hat. I am from Buffalo, New York. So yes, I was in attendance at UFC 210, where Daniel Cormier defended his UFC light heavyweight belt versus Anthony Johnson. And there was the very interesting, very controversial fight featuring Chris Weidman and Gegard Mousasi. But wanted to give you guys my prediction and my preview for these fights. Now, let's start off with the main event, Amanda Nunes versus Valentina Shevchenko. I'm really excited for this fight. Amanda Nunes is coming off her destruction, 48-second destruction of Ronda Rousey. Valentina Shevchenko, in her own right, has put together two very solid wins versus Holly Holm and Juliana Pena, both on primetime television on UFC on Fox. So I've gotten to see her on national television really kick ass and take names on national television, and Valentina is no joke. She's somebody that is a very good kickboxer, very rangy, very good Muay Thai striker, a Muay Thai specialist in her own right, and I definitely think that Valentina Shevchenko will be a tough challenge for Amanda Nunes. For us not to think that she won't be a tough challenge for Amanda Nunes is an understatement, to say the least. I think that Valentina is the last fighter to really give Amanda some trouble, in which Amanda looked like she was almost losing the round in their fight a couple years ago. So very exciting stuff, to say the least. And Amanda Nunes, though, I believe is a different fighter now than what she was previously when they first fought. I mean, her victory over Miesha Tate, her victory over Ronda Rousey, she virtually retired the two biggest names in the UFC that are women, and Miesha Tate and Ronda Rousey. So Amanda Nunes destroyed Miesha Tate with a first-round submission, and she destroyed Ronda Rousey via TKO. So I expect Amanda Nunes to really come out looking to really prove a point that there are no challenges for her in this UFC bantamweight division, and that's kind of my preview on the bout. We'll go on to the next one. One that I'm really excited for is Yoel Romero and Robert Whitaker. I think that this fight is one that a lot of people are willing to give to Yoel Romero already, and I wouldn't be so quick to do so. I think Robert Whitaker is the real deal after his performance versus Jacare Souza. He was fantastic. He was just all over the place in that fight. Really did not allow Jacare to get him down to the mat. He was able to impose his will by defending the takedown and was able to land clean shots on Jacare Souza. That was extraordinary in my eyes that Robert Whitaker was able to do that to a game opponent, a top-of-the-line opponent in Jacare Souza. I think Yoel Romero wanted this fight. He wanted a fight in which he would get a shot at a belt, whether it be an interim belt or a UFC middleweight title. And most people within the circles of mixed martial arts believe that Robert Whitaker should not have been given this fight. I extremely disagree. After his performance versus Jacare Souza, there was really no other competitor in the division that you could put in there coming off that big of a win. Luke Rockhold still reeling from that loss to Michael Bisping. Jacare obviously losing to Robert Whitaker. Chris Weidman has really been in the loss column as of late. And Gegard Mousasi not really coming off the most dominant of victories over Chris Weidman, and you know has kind of ranked lower than Robert Whitaker. Chris Weidman never fought Jacare Souza. Jacare Souza was right there on the precipice of getting a title shot. It definitely would have been Yoel Romero versus Jacare 2 had Jacare gotten through Robert Whitaker. So I think Robert Whitaker, I'm willing to say Robert Whitaker will win this fight. He is very rangy, very good footwork, very solid, stiff punching power. I know Yoel Romero is the soldier of God, and he's a very dangerous man, but Robert Whitaker's takedown defense is for real. I've seen him in plenty of fights, whether it be at welterweight or middleweight, defend the takedown with ease, and I think that really rang true when he fought Jacare Souza. So I'm going with Robert Whitaker for that fight. And obviously my next fight that I'm really excited for is Robbie Lawler versus Donald Cerrone. Two gamer type fighters, two guys that show up, like to scrap, and I expect Robbie Lawler, coming off a loss to Tyron Woodley in which he lost his title about a year ago. This is the first fight that Lawler has had, as I just mentioned, in a year. So a lot of people are kind of curious as to what he will bring to the octagon, but I expect Robbie Lawler to really come out firing on all cylinders, as we have known him to do. We've seen him do, I should say, in his previous fights. Donald Cerrone is the cowboy. He's a badass fighter. He's somebody that has been in the UFC for quite some time. WEC, he was a badass. So this is a fight that the fans are really going to enjoy. This is a fight that the fans really asked for inside the UFC circles and the MMA world, and they're going to get it. So I'm very excited for Lawler and Cerrone. I do expect Robbie Lawler to get back in the win column, get a win over a big-name opponent, and Donald Cerrone, putting him right back in there in the title picture in the UFC welterweight division. Next up on the line is Alistair Overeem versus Fabricio Werdum 3. This is the third time that both of these fighters have fought each other, dating back to the Strikeforce Pride days. This is the third bout. It's pretty rare that you have two fighters fight in each and every major mixed martial arts organization within the last 10 years, and Overeem and Werdum are doing so, with Werdum and Overeem meeting in Pride, Strikeforce, and now the UFC. So this fight is really essentially a crossroads fight for both Fabricio Werdum and Alistair Overeem. Whoever wins this fight is still in the title picture. Whoever loses this fight is no longer in the title picture whatsoever. So they are basically going back to the end of the line, looking to get back into the contention. A loss by one of these fighters puts them in the back of the line at the UFC heavyweight division. So I'm going to go with Alistair Overeem. I like what I have seen from him. His last performance versus Mark Hunt was an impressive one. Mark Hunt is no joke. We all know that. and I like Alistair Overeem's. I liked Alistair Overeem's performance against Stipe Miocic. He dropped the heavyweight champion, was real close to becoming the heavyweight champion, and that was not the case. Stipe was able to battle through and win that fight, but I like Overeem's ability as a striker, one of the best strikers in MMA, definitely the best striker in the heavyweight division outside of the champion, Stipe Miocic. So I'm going to go with Overeem for that fight. Last but not least, Anthony Pettis back in the UFC lightweight division after a loss to the now UFC featherweight champion Max Holloway. That fight was an interim featherweight championship fight back at UFC 208, I believe, in Toronto in December of 2016. So Anthony Pettis is really reeling. He needs to get back in the win column, but they could not have put him against a tougher opponent, a more badass opponent than Jim Miller. You go on, SureDog.com, you go look at all the fighter profiles. There are few fighters that have fought the who's who like Jim Miller has in the UFC lightweight division, and the same could be said for Anthony Pettis in that case. I'm really excited to see this fight. I think that this is one that will be one for the ages. You'll see the high-flying, soccer-like kicking style, the crazy kicks that this guy throws on Anthony Pettis, the Showtime Anthony Pettis. I expect Pettis to really come out trying to get that knockout, and Jim Miller is a submission artist. So one of the few fighters that have over 10 performance of the night bonuses and stuff of that nature in the UFC side of things. So I'm really excited for these fights. Last but not least, to give my prediction on the main event of the evening, in which Amanda Nunes will take on Valentina Shevchenko, I'm going to go with the champion retaining her belt, but I think it's going to be a much tougher fight than what most people expect. Shevchenko is no joke. She's been around for a long time. Her toughest bout to date was against Amanda Nunes in the UFC, and the same can be said for Amanda Nunes. So Valentina Shevchenko is the rightful contender for this UFC bantamweight title, and I expect Amanda Nunes to really make a statement. Try to make a statement in this fight versus Valentina Shevchenko, but I expect Valentina to be up to the challenge. I don't see this one ending until the third or fourth round with a submission victory for Amanda Nunes. I'm Ryan Thomas, guys and gals, the host of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. So thank you so much for tuning into the Thomas Take Sports Podcast YouTube channel. Expect a lot more activity on this channel. Take care. Thanks for joining me.